And start our meeting. Dr. Thomason, roll call.
President Reese, members of the board, please let the record show that all board members are present tonight.
All right. We're going to go ahead and do our moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, 4.0, approval of the agenda. I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
All right. Any questions about the agenda? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. 5.0, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Thomason.
Yes, President Reese, members of the board, tonight we have some special groups with us tonight. So first of all, I would like to invite our Cortina Elementary principal, Dan Cover, up to take a look at some of our Points of Pride's winners from Cortina Elementary School. Mr. Cover.
Good evening, President Reese, members of the board, Dr. Thomason and cabinet, and guests here at our board meeting tonight. I see we have some scouts here, so thank you for coming to see how a board meeting works. Tonight I have the pleasure of honoring some very special people to us here at Cortina. I'm going to start out with our teacher from Cortina, Miss Michelson. Come on up, Miss Michelson. Miss Michelson is a 6th grade social studies teacher at our campus, but she is much, much more than just a 6th grade teacher. She's involved throughout the campus. She's actually finished her leadership endorsement and is an aspiring administrator, hopefully in our district here soon. So thank you for all that you do for Cortina. We appreciate everything that you do for us. All right, next up, I have our support staff member who we chose to give an award to tonight, and our support staff member is David Benavidez. So come on up, David. David is our plant foreman at Cortina Elementary. He is responsible for everything basically on Cortina campus that could possibly go wrong, from a toilet that doesn't flush to an accident out on the playground, or just changing air filters, which he seems to do a lot on our campus. So David is Mr. Fix-It. He's able to squash scorpions and all that good stuff as well. So thank you so much, David, for all that you do for Cortina. Right, next up we have our volunteer of Cortina that we chose to recognize tonight, and that is Miss Tawny Hall. Come on up. Mrs. Hall is our PTO president. She took over this year for PTO president, and she's done a great job taking over some very big shoes in Miss Francine from last year, our PTO president. So Tawny, you have done a great job this year of taking over, making sure that things run smoothly at Cortina and continue to improve the system as well. So thank you very much. And lastly, I actually brought something for our board members from our next person that we're going to honor. So if you guys could each take one of those. Our next person that we're going to honor is actually McKenna Frigrell. Come on up, McKenna. And she is our student that we are recognizing. McKenna is a 6th grader at Cortina, and she is an aspiring writer, activist, about anything you could think of, mathematician, engineer, you name it, McKenna is involved in it at our school. She actually started a club this year and is writing a newspaper, which she works on with her 6th grade language arts and other 6th grade teachers as well. So McKenna, you are a shining star, and you're going to do great things in the future, and you're already doing great things. So thank you for everything you do. All right, real quick, I'm going to hand the microphone down. Can you please embarrass your family a little bit and tell us who's here with you tonight?
Okay, I got my wife, Linda, and my daughter, Rosalinda, Jacob, Lisa, and my 2 little munchkins, Mikey and Nicholas.
I have my husband David here tonight and my 2 daughters, Kylie and Ashley.
I have my husband Kirk, my 3 kids, Dean, Keaton, and Sutton.
I have my sister Alexa, my grandma Jane, my mom Jackie, my dad Sky, and my little sister Jada, and my brother Gunnar, and my grandpa Paul.
All right, can you get a good picture?
Now, Governing Board, I'd like to bring up Dr. Michael Fowler and Benny Buhlholz to recognize one of the biggest jokesters in our district.
Thank you. President Reese, members of the board, Dr. Thomason and cabinet, it is our privilege tonight to honor one of our own. Bobby Hessler, would you come up here, please? Bobby has been a loyal employee of the Higley School District since July of 2012, where he was hired as a general maintenance worker. Due to his hard work ethic, Bobby was moved to our low voltage worker position in 2015 in September. Bobby comes to work every day with a great attitude and makes Higley a fun and positive place to work. He always is available to help no matter what the job is, and he does it with a smile. His positive attitude and hard work ethic inspire many that he works with. The maintenance department is proud and honored to have Bobby as a part of his team. If you're here with Bobby tonight, would you stand up, just be recognized?
guilt, no guilt. Thank you. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, bye, everybody.
Yeah. It's not in it.
Upcoming events. President Reese, members of the board, we do have a holiday coming up on Monday, February 20th. That's President's Day. There will be no school. Followed by Wednesday, the 22nd, for the governing board meeting and the work study starting at 5:30 here in the district boardroom. And then the following board meeting for March would be March 8th at 5:30 with the work study in the back of the boardroom and the board meeting starting at 6:30. And then we start our spring break March 13th through the 24th. So that would be our coming events.
Thank you. So I would just, while we're at board comments, like to acknowledge Mr. Scott Anderson. He is a Gilbert Council member who is with us tonight, so thank you for coming. I know there's been a lot of discussion on how the school districts in the town can work better together, and so Mr. Anderson's kind of our guy right now. So thank you for coming and being here with us. I was able to go to both of the signing day events at Higley and Williamsfield. That was really cool. We have a lot of kids signing for athletics, and what was really neat about that is because they have to make sure they're top-notch in their sport, but also academically. So we had a lot of kids signing, committing to colleges, and that was fun. I was also able to attend the pep assembly at Cooley today. They were loud. You get 7th and 8th graders in that gym, and they were loud. But it was fun. They had a great time, and they were trying to do a little basketball shoot-off, and it was a lot of fun. So it's been a busy couple weeks. I know a couple of you attended.
Sure. I would just like to say I see the MC over there. Could you just stand up so everybody can see you? Because I just want to say some things. If we had this Mandarin program last Tuesday, knocked it out of the water. I'm just telling you, from the time, from you being the MC, hosting it, the place was packed in the Performing Arts building, and the students did a wonderful job. The costumes, I don't know what else. I mean, it was just incredible. And thank you for your leadership and the program that you have at your school. And just thank you for what you've done. And while you're standing, also, I see I have a brochure on your STEAM night is coming up on next Wednesday, the 15th. As always, been the last couple of years, and it's incredible. The trucks and everything, different themes every year, and just again, knock it out of the park again. So thank you again for your leadership on this program. So thank you. Joanne.
I agree. I thought that everything that whole night, nothing went wrong. It was just so fun. And those little preschoolers, oh my goodness, they are so far ahead of the game. So thank you for all that you did. It was a beautiful night.
Any other board comments?
President Reese?
Dr. Thomason?
Yes, I would like to really acknowledge the hard work and dedication of our school board. I'm not sure the public knows that we've come together on Saturday for a board retreat. Board members spent their own time, and 6 hours of hard work and dedication to the schools and the district on Saturday. Thank you very much, governing board, for coming together.
Well, thank you. You were there as well, and it's really a group effort, and so we're really excited about this board and coming together and working together. And Saturday was a great time for us to get to know each other a little bit better. So it was very beneficial. I'm really excited for these next 2 years with this board. All right, if we don't have any other board comments, then we will go to 6.0, request to speak to governing board. We currently don't have any. If you would like to, you can put in a request with Mrs. Reach. 7.0, consent agenda items. I move that we approve consent agenda items 7.1 through 7.7.
Second.
President Reese,
Mrs. Kaler?
I have a question or concern about the overnight trip request for Higley Unified School District administrators to attend the California Association. I noticed that we are paying for late fees on this, and there's no, if I'm stand corrected, there's not a teacher attending. Is this just for admin?
President Reese, members of the board, I have talked to Dr. Schillingberg about that, and I'll let him answer some of these questions. We did talk about it, and he is prepared for tonight to answer questions.
Yeah, the reason that we're late in this is not being from the West Coast, I wasn't aware of conferences that were available in this area. So when we hired our new gifted coordinator, she was aware of this conference, so that's why we chose to go to it. It's also not typical to send teachers out of state. We don't want them out of the classroom. We want them teaching. And if I were to send them out of state, it would have to be at a conference that we'd attended before and could verify that it's worth that time. So you typically would send administrators first. If it's a good conference, then the next time you'd send in some teachers.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the consent agenda? All right, then all those in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. And I just want to say on our consent agenda, we have lots of gifts and donations, and I just want to recognize that I can't list them all. We have quite a few, to our PTOs, to our schools. I just want to thank everyone who does give to our schools. And we do have a couple on here, and I do see them often, is companies that are doing donation matching. So we certainly appreciate those companies, and we appreciate those community members for donating and asking their companies to match them. So I just wanted to acknowledge we do have quite a few on this one, so thank you. 8.0, we don't have any old business. We're going to go on to our action and information items. 9.1 is our monthly governing board financial report for January of 2017. You should have had an opportunity to look at it and the different funds. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Holland?
No.
All right, and I also want to clarify, because there's been some requests from the community, that this information is available on our website through the governing board. It's all the reports that we look at is available through the board packet, so the board agenda. So it is available for people who aren't here, or if they are and they just want more information on our finances, they're welcome to look at that. We're going to go on to 9.2. This was an item that we were going to cover in our work study session, but we felt that the information regarding the media specialists for our elementary schools was going to take up our time, and it needed to take up our time. So we did ask that this be moved to an information item. So it's information on our middle school lease as an update. This will help some of our newer board members understand our lease, the way it's structured, what our payments are going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that to Mr. Holland. Is that correct?
President Reese, members of the board, at this time I would ask Mr. Holland and our district attorney, Linda Good, to go ahead and go through the middle school lease PowerPoint.
Good evening. I'm going to give you some background. I know that none of you were involved in entering into the middle school leases. And as a matter of fact, there's no one left in the district who was involved in that. Dr. Thomason and I were both in the district office, but knew nothing about the plans. So what I'm going to tell you is what we have pieced together from the documentation, and we believe it is accurate. There might be a few pieces missing of paper that we don't know about, but nothing crucial. You're all aware that the middle school leases were entered into, but whether you knew about the leases or not, you do know that we opened the middle school in July of 2013. The financing for the schools it's maybe unfamiliar here, but in California, it's very common. A lease back, design build kind of construction. 2 leases. A ground lease, the district owned the property, and they lease it, get construction financing, and then the facility that's constructed leased back to the district. That's the simple version. Okay. There's a number of entities that were involved. The district, of course. The district put out an RFP for development financing for that kind of an arrangement. Educational Facilities Development Services is the company that responded. There were actually 3 responses. EDFS was selected. The actual entity that then became involved was a subsidiary, the EFDS Higley Limited Liability Company. The other main player is the Magellan Foundation, which is a 501c3 corporation for the purpose of raising funds for educational institutions. They too formed an entity that was specific for this project. I'm just going to call it the foundation. It's those 2 subsidiaries that were actually parties. Now, the Industrial Development Authority of the City of Phoenix was a player, but they only had a certain role and then they were done. The same thing with core construction. Now, on the left-hand side, we have the project. The district contracted with EFDS, who then contracted with core construction to get the project built. The money is on the right-hand side. At the bottom, we have the Industrial Development Authority, which issued the bonds. The little wavy line is there because we're omitting. Whenever you issue bonds, there are bond trustees and there are a company that keeps the books on it, and they don't matter. They did matter to make it happen, but we don't need to worry about them. The bondholders, of course, buy the bonds, so that's where the money comes from. It goes to the foundation, and the foundation, you'll see the little double 2-headed arrow between. There's an agreement between the 2 entities, the EFDS and foundation, that the money is going to then go over to EFDS to be used for that construction contract. Okay. Green arrows, I guess they don't really show green up there. I don't know if yours do. But green for money. That's how we follow the money. We owned the property, the district owned the property, entered into a ground lease with the foundation. That's the first lease. District leases the land. For that, the district receives $100. The other agreement is the facilities use agreement, and that's normally what we're referring to when we say the middle school leases. The facility use agreement is really a lease. That agreement receives, because of that agreement, the money goes to the foundation, and then ultimately it goes to the bondholders. So that's kind of how we got involved with that. The facilities use agreement is has a 40-year term. Its term is until 2053, or it could be ended earlier if all the bonds are paid off. And that's what Mr. Holland's going to talk to you about later. December 1st of 2022 is the first time that any of the bonds mature. At that time and any time after that, the bonds can be called to be redeemed. So you can't really do anything with those bonds until that point. After that, any or all of them can be redeemed. The payments that the district makes under the facilities use agreement are identified as use fees. And there are several different types of use fees. There's a development fee, and that goes to EFDS, which was the developer. All the costs of issuing the bonds are included in there. And there is, beginning in 2019, an additional fee begins to be charged annually for a capital repairs fund. The district pays all of the maintenance expenses on the building and any improvements on the land. But that capital reserve fund can be used for doing that maintenance. And there is a schedule of maintenance to be done, but again, that can be paid for with money that is in the capital repair fund. Okay, when this was set up, where was the money thought to be coming from? There was a contribution of the district's, some of the district's adjacent ways money to pay for off-site improvements. We'll get into that. It was anticipated that the student growth would cover most of the lease payments. Some of that growth was just based on how much development there would be in the district. And and it would bring new students, additional students, and then the preschoolers pay tuition. So that was the intent. Now, that would take care of the construction end. It was anticipated. Also, the capital outlay and M&O overrides were anticipated to furnish and provide equipment, and then the M&O to take care of the salaries and the increased expenses of operating the schools. Now, as we all know, in November of 2012, the overrides did not pass. The bonds were issued on December 1st of that year. In the spring of 2013, it was decided that some additional funding would be available if the middle schools opened as charter schools. And that was done. Ever since they started the district charter schools, what was it, around 2000, late 90s?
Okay.
Yeah, I think in the late 90s. There could be charter schools, but as well as the private entities, districts could form a charter school. So you could have a district school that is a charter school.
Our elected officials, this is what was in place, correct? And so that's why we went forward with it, because this was the plan at
No,
that time.
It was not the plan. At the time that the bonds were issued, it was not intended to be charter schools.
Okay.
So,
But when there was a need for additional funding, the idea was that they could be chartered.
just to reiterate her timeline, in November, the override did not pass,
Right.
but allowing us to enter into a lease longer than 3 years or 5 years,
5 years.
longer than 5 years, that did pass. So it gave the district the permission to enter into a lease longer than 5 years. However, we did not pass the override for funding. So that happened in November. In November, the agreement was made to move forward with them, knowing that our funding did not pass.
Okay.
Then, as we were moving forward, we didn't have funding, and we were already moving forward. Then it was suggested that we perhaps use the charter option that at the time was available through the state. So we didn't say, oh, we're going to just do it as charter and use that funding. We were already moving forward. The charter was an afterthought as we were already moving forward.
Saw that as an option.
We saw it as an option, yes.
And that was after a new finance director came in I think it was December. It was November or December, right about the time the bonds were sold. And he had the idea that, and then that got developed as a real possibility, because there is some additional funding that charter schools get that a regular district school does not. Unfortunately, in the spring of 2014, the legislature did away with districts' charter schools. No more could be formed, and the ones that had been opened after June 30th of 2013 were only going to be funded for 1 more year. And at the end of that time, they would just revert to being regular district schools. So the district was able to operate the middle schools as charter schools for 2 years. And then they became and are now just regular district schools.
Can I add something in there?
Sure.
And correct me if I'm wrong. It was also my understanding for us to go forward with the charter, we had to give up our growth funding for the whole district for that year.
What it was is that we could, any of the students who had been in the district the year before could not be counted as additional students, even though they were new students to the charter school.
Okay, so it was only the growth money for those 2 schools.
Yes, well,
Okay.
those students. See,
Right.
Charter schools are funded the way all of them are now, current year funding. And taxes are distributed to you on the basis of your current ADM, student count. At the time that we opened the middle schools, charter schools were funded in that manner. At the beginning of the year, you estimate how many students you're going to have, and it all sorts out during the year. The regular district schools, however, were funded on the ADM from the previous year. So you couldn't count them as new students because that was the year that those students would be funded. If you think of the money being attached to the students. Once they came over to the charter school, they couldn't be counted for that first year.
So essentially that first year, if they were coming from one of our district schools,
Then there was no funding for them.
there was no funding for those kids.
That's right, because the funding for them was going to be coming to the district that year. We looked into that very carefully. I wrote an opinion to the, to ask the opinion of the Attorney General. We were arguing that a certain statute could be interpreted that they would be able to be counted, but we got a very definite, no, that's not the way it's done.
And then just one other clarifying point, I'm sorry, with the, regarding the charters and the state changing their mind on that, I don't know if you guys have the number, but in 2013, there was a large number of school districts that decided to charter schools, which then they were saying we just can't fund this, so they went back to that June of 13. But I can tell you also from my perspective, during that time, before we had decided to charter, during that legislative session, it was already talked about. There was already discussion that they were going to be getting rid of district charters. So that was already moving forward at the time. We chose to charter. So it wasn't a total surprise when the state said no, because that had already been talked about. So
From the earliest time, school districts, I have to say, did bring it on themselves. Some districts became very aggressive at opening charter schools and then charging the chartered entity fees. And at one point, the legislature, I mean, it was nothing for somebody up in the northeast corner of the state chartering some entity down in Eloy. And so there was one, at one point, they said, okay, school districts can't charter outside of their own boundaries, that you could charter a school within your own boundaries. So there had been some abuses of the whole system, and unfortunately, Higley got, caught up in that at the time that the legislature said enough is enough.
I do have a question. When you had that conversation with the Attorney General and he said no, why wasn't that board at that time a little more aggressive, assertive, or whatever, in correcting?
I don't think we can answer why for anybody else.
Well, okay.
Well, and I was part of the board.
I'm just curious. I
At
mean,
this
it's
point,
like,
at this
why?
point, I
Why?
came on the board after the lease agreement, after everything was already moving forward. And it was that you couldn't double dip for the same student. The district was going to be paid for that student, but it would be coming in the same year that that student would be counted. So because they funded district and charters different, and we knew that, we were told that we were gonna, in order to do this, you have to give up your growth money. And that was a decision that was made. They said it was, going forward with the charter outweighed the growth money we would get.
Okay. I guess I'm just a little confused. So then they decided not to let the public schools have the charters, okay? But we signed the papers at that time when they said the charters, okay? So why, it's like you want to buy a house and then they change their mind and all the documents.
Well, they changed it for every school district or every school that was chartered.
I understand, but so why wasn't some I guess the why question in my brain is, so why did the district say, okay, we signed this in good faith, you changed your mind here?
I think there was some discussion on the legalities of, we already chartered, how can you go back and change it?
Well, a lot of districts
President
make
Reese,
that argument.
members of the board, I would like to tell you that I do regularly make that argument down at the legislature to this day. I am regularly meeting with some of our state legislatures, and we are having those conversations because we were unfavorably punished for a decision that was not ours, made by the legislation.
That's exactly what I'm asking, why we're punished for something that we did the right way. We went through the process, and now we as a board are paying for that, in the district. So
Yeah. Yes and no, I agree.
okay, so explain.
Well, yes, we, as a school district, we're paying for we thought we had another way to fund it. However, we were already moving forward without that charter funding anyway. So we would still be where we are today, even if the state didn't, had we not even chartered, had they not changed their mind. Had we not chartered, we would be in where we are, because chartering came after we were moving forward. So it's not like we moved forward because we could charter and we counted on that funding. We were moving forward and needed funding, and that was an option. So I know that there was lots of legal discussions on how can you go back if we had our charter approved? How can you go back and now make it retroactive when you're pulling those charters? And that's just a legal battle. And like Ms. Good said, lots of districts were talking about that and like, how can you do it?
That was a topic that was coming up annually at the legislature for quite a while. But as Mrs. Reese said, the idea of chartering, it wasn't that the middle schools are going to be charter schools, so let's build them. It happened the other way. The let's build the schools decision was made, and then later thought, okay, we'll make them charter schools.
So did any of these districts that were in the same situation as we were a little more aggressive with this conversation?
I don't think so.
It seemed everybody backed off. Why didn't any of the districts, somebody like lead the group or nothing at all? We just kind of like...
I'm not sure what you're asking.
So he's seeking from a,
Answer it, go ahead.
what he's asking is from a legal standpoint, why did we not push the legislature saying you need to honor these? Maybe you don't do any more forward, but you need to honor what you've done, kind of pushing that legal.
I'm sure that the schools did, and perhaps Dr. Thomason can talk better to that.
President Reese, members of the board, there was some push by some of the school districts at that time, notably Vale School District in Tucson and up North Cave Creek District. So those are the two main school districts that I've worked with on this situation. Unfortunately, we're in a different situation because of our leaseback situation, and it didn't adversely affect them financially the way it is affecting us. And so I am still I'm still pursuing those options that I have with legislation to see if there's some kind of relief we can get through them or some kind of assistance we can get through them. But Mr. Witovich, to answer your question directly, the other school districts have dropped off. We're on our own.
Okay, we came up with the idea of chartering, but one of the ways that we had already decided to put in, I keep saying we, and you do understand, I mean the district. Adjacent ways funding is authorized by ARS 15995. It's a special assessment against all of the taxable property in a district, and its purpose is to fix up adjacent rights-of-way. Any of the facilities, the roadway itself, underground utilities, sidewalks, fences, anything that is for the purpose of improving the right-of-way. It might be traffic signals. I've got just some examples up there. And you can bring underground utilities to the site with the adjacent ways money. You can't go ahead and use those funds to get those utilities spread out within the site. But you can use some adjacent ways funds can be used for the ingress and egress, can be used for the fire lanes and areas for the buses. Those roads, of course, have to be built a little stronger, carry those weights. And so adjacent ways funds, that's just what they can be used for. How did they fit in to the financing? The way they fit in was that the district said they could put into the construction $3 million for each site to cover off-site improvements, and then those on-site improvements that are available. The district would give that money to the foundation. That's who was going to enter into the construction contract, so that those funds would be used in the construction. The next one. Under the facilities use agreement, and that causes a little bit of problems. You see the question there at the top. Were the adjacent ways funds used for lease payments? It can very much look that way. The facilities use agreement, as we mentioned before, charges several fees. And one of them is a prepaid use fee. And it's outlined that it's going to be paid $3 million at the beginning, an in-kind payment of $420,000, which was already paid by the district for design services, and $3 million that would be paid later. Taxes are distributed to the districts throughout the year. At the beginning of the project, the district didn't have all $6 million. They could put in $3 million, and then one-year bonds, $3 million worth of one-year bonds were sold to bridge the period of time before the district would have its money. Okay, and it was said, not in the document, but in the official statement for the bonds, it was noted that that would be paid with adjacent ways monies. Well, so that, it's in this document. It says it's a user's fee. Isn't that a payment on a lease? Well, there's another section of the lease, though, that gives the district a credit of $21.75 per square foot, which gives you over $6 million. So really, the prepaid use fee is actually canceled out by the credit for those improvements. And it mentions that credit is for the purpose of qualified improvements. So it certainly looks like it. If you only look at that one section, it definitely looks like adjacent ways money is going to be used for a lease payment. But when you look at the other side, it's offset. Don't ask me why it was structured that way. I wasn't involved, nobody, we don't really know. And, but however it is, it's my opinion that the whole intent was that those $6 million would be used for improvements. And I have to tell you, it is not unimaginable. $6 million is easily spent on off-site improvements. I know there had to be widening of the right-of-way up at Cooley. And so there were a lot of improvements that are required. So it's not an outlandish figure. It would be quite reasonable. Now, I've taken a long time because it took a long time to get us there. Now, Mr. Holland's going to tell us, can you get out of
it? I would rather have started with him because I am so depressed at this moment. So I need him.
I agree. I'm depressed too because I have to find the funds. I'm going to try. So let's talk about, Linda kind of laid the foundation. So exactly what did this cost and where were these funds supposed to come from? So if you'll notice on this slide, I started out with these sources. Now this was an estimated projection. So we had sold bonds in the amount of $69,250,000. We had an issue of premium of $1.3 million, and then we had the equity contribution that Linda just mentioned of the $3 million. That comes to a total budget of $73,561,912. How were those funds used? And you can see down below how that breaks down. You have a project fund at 65.7. You have capitalized interest. You have debt service at 3.6. You have operating expenses, and then you have the cost of issuance of those bonds, a little over $2 million. Again, tying it back to spending every penny of $73,561,912. So what does that mean for us now? So as of right now, our lease payment is $3,250,000. That is this year and next year. So you'll notice it says going through 6/30 of 18. On 7/1 of 18, our next lease payment will be $4.2 million, where you'll notice that goes for 1 year. The next year, starting July 1st of 19, our lease payment will go to $4.4 million, where it is scheduled to stay until 6/30 of 2053. Currently, we are only paying interest and fees. We have not paid any principal at all. The first principal payment will be made on December the 1st of 18 in the amount of $850,000. The rest, again, over $2.2 million in interest and fees. So the biggest question is okay, what do we do now, and can we get out of it? I understand. So the first thing, we would have to get permission from the foundation to be able to approach that. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Is that better? I have problems with microphones, obviously, still. But to do that, what would we have to do? Where would we get those funds? Well, we have talked and tried to figure that out. You know, the only option we can kind of come up with is we would have to sell new bonds. However, of course, that would be a process. We have to make sure first that we have enough room that we can issue those bonds, right? That we're not maxed out. And so that will take some time to come up with, which raises based off of property values. So as those increase and our bond, our indebtedness goes down, and we have more availability. Does that make sense? To start that process, we could start as early as putting a proposal together and putting it on the ballot for the November 2018 election. If it is approved by our voters, then we could sell those bonds in 2019.
Can I clarify real quick? Because I know on our bonds, we have to be very specific what it's used for.
Correct.
So I'm assuming if at some point we decide to go out for bonds in November, I'm assuming that the only thing on this bond would be to pay our middle school lease.
Correct.
To pay it off. Okay. Thanks.
Because as you're going to see, we're going to need approximately $70 million to do that. If it's approved and if they're sold and we're able to raise the $70 million, those funds would then be placed in an escrow account where the lease payments now that we were having to come up with would come out of those funds. Okay? As Linda had mentioned, the first bond that becomes callable is December the 1st of 2022. So we can't do anything, sell the bonds, put it in the bank, right? And on December the 1st of 2022, with the approval of the foundation, call all the bonds and pay it off.
So they don't have different maturity dates?
They do have different maturity dates, but if we have the funding to cover all that and pay it all back, then we could call those at that time.
Okay.
And please know that Dr. Thompson and I have worked very closely with attorneys to see if there's a way that they can help us with this lease situation. We've worked closely with Stiefel, who was our bonds company that worked with us, and all of the conversations that we have had and conclusions we have come to right now is you're in a mess, which we get, And the only way that we have been able to come up with so far is possibly putting together and requesting to sell new bonds.
So the conversation that was had back then, that we could choose to pay it off anytime we wanted, no prepayment penalty, according to this, is not necessarily accurate because we have to wait for those bonds to be called?
First one.
Okay.
So you can't do anything for 10 years, right? So remember, it was approved in 12. We signed the agreement December the 1st of 12. We made our first payment in 13. So 10 years from 12 is December 1st of 2022.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And to clarify, that takes care of everything, both
Correct.
schools
Both
and
schools.
lease, because we have.
We would then
Correct.
own them.
Then
We would own them again. Well,
we would own the land.
we would own our land
and
and
the building.
Yes.
Thank you.
Because we already own the land. We leased it to them for 40 years for $100. So they got a steal, right?
Can I ask a couple awkward questions? Okay, for the 70 million, are these two schools worth that? I mean, I'm just kind of curious. And another thing, is it possible another question is to have a conversation with the foundation about renegotiation? And another option is to be more aggressive with you and are supporting you to be more aggressive with our legislators at looking. I mean, are those options out there for us or no?
I can hit the renegotiation issue.
Okay, please.
We cannot do that because of the bondholders.
Okay.
So we can't renegotiate the terms of the lease. What we can do is pay off the bonds. And I don't know if it was clear, as I was sitting back there, I'm not sure. When we call bonds to pay them off, you only pay the interest up to that date that they are being called and redeemed. So we're cutting off years' worth of interest.
30.
President Reese, members of the board, I do have another plan that I'm working with legislation on, and that would require special legislation. It is a long shot, but I'm still pursuing that with some of our legislatures in the state of Arizona to take a look at some different options to help us out with some of the financing. It has been used one time back in the 1980s, and as far as research and studying my options, this is the other option, which would be a long shot, but I'm still continuing to pursue that with our legislation to help relieve the Higley Unified School District of this situation.
Able to assist you with that, or is some corporation that has experience with this that could help you with that?
Yes, Vice President Wutovich, I'm working with some of the bond attorneys that we utilize for the sale of our bonds and taking a look at that to help me out with that. But I will tell you, they don't want to be associated with it when I go to it, so I'm getting the research and the information from them, but they don't want to be associated with it when it goes to the legislation.
So here we'll help you kind of figure it out, and then you're on your own. Okay. Can you maybe answer some questions?
I'll try.
It was also my understanding that we have obviously equipment rolled into these leases, iPads and things like that. I know that we can only pay on technology for so long because then it's considered outdated. How is all that working? Do you know?
How is it working as far as?
Well, I mean, obviously we can't pay 40 years on an iPad.
Well, as the way it's built right now, you are.
And I didn't think that was necessarily allowed from a state standpoint. I may be wrong, but my understanding was that you couldn't get certain equipment or anything that it's given a certain lifespan, and that you're not supposed to have to be able to pay after? I know Linda's looking at me all confused, and I don't know, I may be wrong. This was my understanding, is that there are certain limits on how long you can pay for equipment items because they do have a shelf life. And if my understanding is correct, that the iPads, that was purposefully rolled into the lease piece, into the middle schools, obviously that everything rolls into the lease, then potentially we could be paying 40 years on an iPad, and boy, let me tell you, I would love to see what that's going to look like.
Well, and to President Reese, members of the board, and just to mention briefly about the iPads, it is also my understanding, though, and our technology director here can support me on this, those iPads come next school year is no longer going to be supported by Apple. So basically they will become useless, correct?
So
then we're going to have to buy new ones or figure something else out.
So we're still paying for them to be useless, and now we have to buy more. Because I know at some point there was some conversation about looking at spreading some of those iPads throughout the district, perhaps looking at our elementary schools, and then the conversation kind of came back and said, no, we can't. They have to stay on at those middle schools because that's who's paying for it. I mean, because it's in the lease. So that we weren't able to share that technology with our other schools, I mean, those particular items. So
Well, we won't have to worry about sharing them because they won't work.
oh heavens.
So why aren't we having a conversation about that? If we're paying for something like this, so why aren't we having some legal representation of us? Or I mean, I don't know if we can talk about it here, but this seems to be not right here.
President Reese.
Yes.
Mrs. Kaler.
I'm just trying to remember back, because I did used to come to those board meetings back in the day, and I think there was just Mr. Witovich really specifically, just a lot of misconceptions on there was going to be an override, and if the override passed, then we were going to build middle schools, and then the override didn't pass, and we still built middle schools. And there was that piece. Sorry. That piece is still in our community, and it's still talked about. So just so you know, there was definitely some.
During the election, it was that both had to happen. The override and the lease both had to happen for this to happen. And only one, the lease part, happened, and
The funding did
Well,
not.
and the funding did not, and we moved forward.
And President Reese, I mean, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't really have repercussions on people that were here before that made bad decisions. I mean, they got us into this. We don't,
Right, so
Right, so
we're
that's what
trying to
we're-
figure out.
right.
Right, no, it's just understanding how we got here, so we're trying to
No, I was
figure.
more answering
yeah.
for-
So now we've got to figure out how we're going to pay for this, and kind of part of that discussion a little bit earlier with having a little bit of extra money, which we never have. We have increase in payment, so that money's got to come from somewhere. We're already figuring out where it's coming from to make these large payments, because the funding that was counted or anticipated before we moved forward didn't come. We do have an override now, so that helps. But that doesn't cover everything, and certainly not covering the increase. So come, 2018, come our 2018-19 school year, we have an increase in a lease payment that we have to figure out. So
Additional $1 million.
So keep doing what you're doing. Don't stop. Keep figuring out what we can do. I love our middle schools, and I would never put a dollar amount on it. And yes, these meetings are recorded, and so that's recorded. I did not support the middle schools through the election. I did not. I didn't think we needed them. I didn't think we had the money to pay for them. I thought our K-8 system was okay. And I did not support the middle schools through the election. Having my kids go through them, I'm very thankful for having them, and I do think they're very valuable. I had one who went to high school coming out of our K-8, and I had one who went to high school who was able to attend both 7 and 8 at our middle schools, and they were very differently prepared for that experience. So I am very, very thankful we do have our middle schools. I think that they have tremendous value, and I'm glad we do have them. I'm sad that we're having to figure out how to pay for them now. So I wish it had been done differently. And we have some increases that are coming up, and I think we just need to be aware of that. And it's a lot of money, and
President Reese,
hopefully we
members
have
of the board,
some options.
I would say that the administration we have now in the cabinets and our finance officer have looked forward, and we're planning on those, and we're being fiscally responsible and putting money away, stashing money away now, just as we did for the textbook adoption, to make sure that we're taking care of our future.
Well, and that's great. I mean, so literally when push comes to shove, we will have the cash to pay it, not that we won't be able to pay our debt, but something else is not being funded for us to put that money away so that we can make that payment. So yes, thank you for looking forward and being prepared so that we can pay our bills, but then we know something else is not being funded maybe the way we want it to, we would hope to, that it should be, because we are having to put that money away to be prepared.
Pay for a $10,000 iPad.
President
I would
Reese,
really love
members
to
of the
know what
board.
that equates over that time.
To put it financial on it, it would be about a 9% increase for the entire district as far as a pay raise. That's about the cost of the middle school leases at this time.
At this time,
Correct. No,
So-
at the 4.5
when it
million,
increases in 2018,
Yes, correct.
it equates to if everybody in our district were to get a 9% increase. Wow. I love our middle schools. I do.
So President Reese, members of the board, I do need to advise you of one other thing. We are currently having a review done by the Auditor General's office because there is a concern, as Linda was explaining, the use of the adjacent ways funds. There's a concern by the Auditor General's office because it was coded or labeled as a lease payment. The Auditor General is auditing us, and currently it's come down, but we're at now currently at $3 million. They have requested documentation. 2 so far. I received a 3rd request on Friday for some additional information, so it is still an ongoing review. I just wanted to advise you of that situation. Hopefully it doesn't get finished soon. However, if it does, and if it is found that it was used inappropriately, Dr. Thomas and I have talked, and our first request, of course, would be to see if we can pay it back in payments, as opposed to $3 million in one swoop. So let me clarify something else. So that when I say pay back, it's not pay back to the Auditor General. Of course, it's to take those $3 million out of our unrestricted capital fund and make our adjacent ways fund whole again. Does that make sense?
Basically, we're paying ourselves back.
Correct.
And it's not a penalty payment back to anybody else with interest on top or anything like that.
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
So, but to clarify, when we say we're paying ourselves back, it's not like we're not just going, okay, well, now we have this money. It's essentially, we have to kind of wait for, there's $3 million we can't collect, essentially. So we're out $3 million. I mean, what it would come down to, if they find that it was a lease payment, not a use, that whole clarification, essentially the district's out an additional $3 million. Right. But still $3 million that we can't use somewhere else.
That is correct.
Okay.
Any-
Do you, I know we've been asking questions, and I even have to say this is the most thorough understanding that I've gotten, the most clarification I've gotten, because all that kind of happened, bits and pieces happened after I came on, but most of this occurred prior to me being on the board. So thank you. I mean, it was very detailed. I thought I have a much better understanding. It helps me piece together the pieces that I do have. Does anyone else have any other questions regarding our lease?
No, just
No.
thank you to you both for putting
So,
that together.
yes, thank you. Keep working, seeing what we can do. And, you know, I certainly appreciate planning ahead and all your time in this. Thank you.
Reason I think I'd like you to end on that note so our community understands that we're planning ahead. Okay, after all the things that I just heard this evening, I think if you could just reiterate that.
We're planning ahead.
They're planning ahead and they have a plan, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
And
please
thank you.
know that I've already managed to encumber next year's lease payment, so at least we have that covered for next year out of this year's budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. See, we wouldn't have been able to get through that in work study either, so I'm glad we were able to move it to an information item out here. And I'm sure our community will be very thankful, those who are here and those who choose to watch it, to get a better understanding of where our district is, where our money's going, and what we are responsible for. So thank you. With that, we are going to move on to 9.3. This has to do with the first read of new policy KHC, which is the distribution and posting of promotional materials. So just to clarify before we do anything, when we typically for new policies or even a change in policy, what we do is called the first read, and it's when the first time we see it and we look through it, if we have questions, if there's something that needs to be changed, and literally it could be grammar, if something grammatically needs to, that won't hold it up, but that if there's something grammatically, if we didn't like the wording on something, we can ask, we can find out what the intent is. Then typically the first read, we just have a conversation and talk about it, and then it will come back to us as a second read. There are some policies that do not, they're pretty clear. The change is pretty clear. It's a new policy, pretty clear, that we don't necessarily need a second read. So as a board, we have a policy that we can choose to waive the second read and just full on approve a new policy or a change in policy the first time we see it. It just depends on however we choose to do that. So we would typically make the motion to approve the first read. We'd go through it if we have any questions, things like that. Then at that point, we can choose to amend the motion and waive the second read, or this, I'm looking at Linda because we've kind of gone through the process here.
Yeah, the standard procedure that we had before in the policy was that you would always have a second read. And as President Reese indicated, I mean, many of the things you're going to see, they're just, we change it to comply with the statute, you know, things that are just cut and dried, kind of housekeeping things. And so we have changed our policy about how we adopt policies to say that the board may decide that it doesn't need to have a second read. Normally, I would have on the agenda, for one that I'm pretty sure is routine, just on the agenda it would say first read and possible adoption. I did not do that this time. This is substantive, and if you have any questions or concerns about it, you know, now's the time to bring them up. And then if there are changes that are required, make them before the second read. And the district did not have a policy on this. ASBA policies is what we normally use, their policy service, and they do have a standard ASBA policy. The district had never adopted it. This is not the ASBA. It's got some of the same elements, but it's not identical.
So with that, at this point, I'm going to move that we approve the first read of new policy KHC, the distribution or posting of promotional materials.
Second.
So questions for Ms. Good, concerns on this policy? Essentially for the community, the policy is saying that we currently don't have a policy on what printed material can be distributed through sending home with the students, typically K6, or displaying or posting announcements of events, which is more likely for our 7 through 12. So renters of the district facilities, they've been allowed to advertise their events. So we felt that we need to have a policy because there are certain groups that we have not allowed to advertise in our school, and it's not been anything that we've done on purpose. We haven't had a policy, and it's just the people who've rented or whatever have just put it up there. So at this point, it was determined that we need to have a standard policy for our administrators, for our schools, so we have something to reference to, so we are consistent, and that there's no bias. And this would allow only school-related groups like student clubs, booster clubs, PTO, people who directly have directly related to the school to have promotional items.
President Reese,
Mrs. Kaler?
I'm not sure if it's just on our iPad.
It might be, but
There's just can I just show it to you?
on the form that's created there for the request to display, there's an area that there's multiple different letters.
I don't know if that's for real or just showing up for us.
President Reese, members of the board, that's a function of transitioning from the iOS system to the system that we use to make the documents. So it's an iPad issue.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions regarding this policy? I think with it being a brand new policy, if you guys are comfortable with it, no questions, no concerns? No? Okay. So at this point then, I would amend my motion of approving the first read to approve the first read and adoption by waiving the second read of policy KHC, distribution, posting of promotional materials.
Support.
Does that have to be the same? Okay. All right. Again, any questions or comments on this policy?
President Rich, I'll just say that this looks similar to what I've seen in other school districts, so nothing strikes me as out of place or anything like that. So.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. We are going on to 9.4. So I'll move to approve the request for invitation to bid for construction remediation at Williamsfield High School.
Second.
Is that you, Mrs. Kaler? Okay. Thanks. All right, so this is to approve the invitation to bid. It's something we had talked about previously, that we knew we would need a different bid for the remediation versus the new construction. So this is just saying we can go out to bid for the remediation part. Is that correct?
That is correct. It also is a requirement of the School Facilities Board, who will pay for a portion of it.
Correct. Any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. All right. We are at 9.5. I move to move forward with a request for proposals, an RFP for athletic uniforms and equipment with sponsorship and rebates.
Second.
Okay. Can you help now? We didn't really have any supporting documentation on this, so what does this mean with sponsorships and rebates?
Absolutely, President Reese, members of the board. Williamsfield High School is in a very enviable position of having 2 state champions, and so with that comes some good things. I'll let Dr. Fowler update you on that.
While you're coming up to the podium, please tell me we're not having names of sponsors on the uniforms? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
No, President Reese, members of the board, what we're doing is following the state procurement laws. We've been approached by some vendors. We can say Nike, Under Armour, some of the big names that are interested in partnering with our schools, not just Williamsfield, but also Higley. And so what we want to do is get the best deal possible for our students and for our schools. And so we're following the state procurement process and doing a formal bid to get that information. And so that's why we're following that.
So we would go out to bid and find out what it would cost, and then these sponsors would then choose to pay for it, pay part of it, things like that?
Well, so some of the offers that are out there is a discounted rate and an incentive for let's say Nike, for example. So if you partner with Nike, then you're going to pay, potentially 40% of what the retail price is, and then there'll be an X amount of dollar value, say for example, $10,000 of equipment or uniforms provided to that school each year as part of that partnership agreement. And so what we want to do is put the bid out there and bring all the offers in and work with each of those schools to get the best deal possible for their programs.
So would that mean, like with what Mr. Matovich said, would that mean the little Nike thing? I mean, not that it would have to say Nike, but would that mean their little logo somewhere?
Well, I mean, yeah, those uniforms would have their logos on them, which
Okay.
they currently do, but no naming, not like you'd see in European soccer. And in fact,
Right.
That's not permitted in the AIA either.
Okay, 'cause
So
I know you see sports teams that look like walking billboards, and
no, that's not permitted by our National High School Federation, or the AIA wouldn't allow that either. So we'd still have to stay within the guidelines that we're currently operating under.
with those guidelines, that doesn't mean their banners and things like that will be around our stadium as well. I mean, what are they asking for from us as a result of the sponsorship?
Really what they're asking for is for our schools to use their product. For example, they want, a school, we'll use Williamsfield as an example, to be an all Nike school or an all Under Armour school. And for that, they would get some benefits. And what we want to do in the RFP process, evaluate what those benefits would look like and make that best decision for Williamsfield and also for Higley as well. So that's why we're doing a formal process to get the best deal possible for our schools.
So this is just going out requesting proposals that's not,
Yeah, if there's not a good deal, we don't have to decide, but that's where we're going out there. So some have approached our schools for deals, and because we have multiple offers, we want to follow the procurement process and make sure that we follow that and get a process where we evaluate and get the best deal possible.
So to clarify, sorry, Mr. Ratovich, I just want to be very clear. We're only going out for a request for a proposal for athletic uniforms and equipment. We are not saying we are buying one school or the other new uniforms. We're not saying we're buying them new equipment. We're going to go out for a proposal and see if the sponsorships that have been approached to us, if it will make sense and offset the cost.
Yeah, we're evaluating if there's situations that would be mutual beneficial for those schools. Then we would bring back, if we have that, bring that back for board's review.
One last, and there'll be equity for both schools. It's
Yeah,
not just.
yes, well, but we also want to treat them differently. I mean, there might be a better deal for one school versus the other, but they don't necessarily have to go with the same program. And I have researched it with some other districts, so we will include the schools in the decision-making process, and they'll be part of our bid evaluation program. And so I know that this is important to students, to coaches and athletes, and people in the clubs, and so we'll make sure that we have that representation, and they'll be part of that decision-making process.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. All right. So we are on future agenda items. Mr. Ratovich, I have not forgot about you. We are still working on creating a process for timelines. Is there, I'm wondering if tonight's discussion with the lease in the middle schools, does that help with the history of the implementation of iPads?
Yes, it does. That was
Okay.
my,
Okay, because I know it's, why is it at the middle school? Why did we go there? But, okay, so you're okay if I remove that? It is early February, so it kind of was included, right? So, we're still looking forward to a presentation regarding teacher shortages in Arizona, the overview of the technology program at the secondary level, the overview of the district's preschool, before and after school, and the cost associated with it. I do see we have a date here for February 22nd. Is that for work study to have that discussion?
President Reese, members of the board, yes, we currently plan on having that at the work study for February 22nd.
Okay. All right. Was there anything else for a future agenda item? I do, based on our work study regarding media specialists, Dr. Thomason will be bringing a recommendation forward at our next board meeting for media specialists. So I don't think it's necessary to put as a future agenda item because that's coming on the next agenda. Anything else?
Just in reference, President Reese, in reference to the presentation regarding teacher shortages, could we possibly have that in March? Because that's when the new contracts are coming out, and seeing where we're at in reference to state and national level for recruitment of teachers in our school district.
Will that be okay? Early March?
President Reese, Mr. Ratovich, we're happy to do it at that point. We will have been to a couple of recruiting events at that point. It'll be a hefty meeting that time because we will be bringing forth all the names for contracts and agreements, probably some second reads on policy related to contracts and agreements that we plan to bring you at the February 22nd board meeting.
Okay. All right, anything else? Mrs. Kaler?
I know that there was chatter several weeks ago about sending out another survey for our calendar. I know that our 2018 or 2017-18 is completed, but I am hearing some more chatter in the community as to where we're going in the future on that, and if we are going to go back to the community on that or not. So that is definitely something I would like to hear more about from you.
Absolutely. President Reese, Mrs. Kaler, Dr. Randy Mellerwine is working with the calendar committee, and he will be working on that and bringing that information forward.
All right, anything else? All All right. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Have a good evening.